Please subscribe to and like our channel. You can read more about our community at our Substack, Exoconscious Humans. With a paid $8 subscription, you can join our monthly Exoconscious coaching through our Substack. And all of our bios are available at exoconscioushumans.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Exoconscious Inform. This is a series where we address current narratives, current programs, current thoughts that are coming forward in this world of UAPs, extraterrestrials, experiencers, contactees. We are a community of integrated contactees as exoconscious humans. And today we are gathered to explore some deeper questions about what our experience has been with extraterrestrials and how that actually lines up with what's being spoken of in the media, what's being written in the news. And today we are going to talk about a video that was released in a podcast and YouTube where Richard Dolan was talking about contactees and giving some examples of persons who have met humanoid contactees and using some language and some thoughts and perspectives that some of us may agree with and some of as contactees and some of us may not agree with as contactees. And so we just thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to come together and just share how we perceive our contact in relationship to this video of Richard's. I also want to say that I'm using the word extraterrestrial and ET today rather than non-human intelligence because non-human intelligence and UAP are terms that were given to the experiencer community, and we really prefer extraterrestrials, multidimensionals, and spiritual beings with whom we communicate and co-create. And we're going to be dealing with 4 questions, and we will deal with one question at a time. A word that Richard used about ET presence here on Earth to we humans, and that's that word infiltration. Our first question is, what abilities are ETs using to indicate their presence to you or to us as experiencers? And how would we describe this presence? And would you describe the presence as infiltration? That's the first question. The second question is, have you had or do you have experiences with ET humanoids? So that would be an extraterrestrial that is actually a human. People have spoken a lot about this, about seeing humans that they were aware were extraterrestrials. So this whole idea of technologically advanced extraterrestrials certainly goes into what we're hearing in the media today. So what is your experience with technologically advanced ETs? Do they display domination or control behaviors? There's a link in the mind of some people that if something is technologically advanced, then it's going to dominate humans, it's going to control human behavior, it's going to control human civilization. And are these technologically advanced ETs ethical or are they spiritual? The fourth question is, what is your response to Dolan's claim that you are a naive idealist because you regard technologically advanced ET species as more spiritual or more ethical? So he claimed that people who talk about advanced consciousness, people that are experiencers, are naive idealists because we have perceived this contact as ethical. Those are the 4 questions. Be sure and stay tuned and listen to all the answers to all 4 questions. So let's start with question 1. I'm just going to go around and introduce everybody. Kevin Briggs is with us, Linda Martuch, Karin Mcleod, Cindy Robinson, Nancy Tertre, and David Graham. So the first question, what abilities are ETs using to indicate their presence to you? How would you describe their presence? And would you describe their presence as infiltration? Who would like to start? Lindy, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So what abilities are ETs using to indicate their presence? I've had at least two different kinds of experiences. One is a knowing. It's just sort of an, oh my God, they're here, and sort of an immediate reaction to try and get to a place where I can see them. And I'll give you a quick example. Normally when I'm going to go outside, I say something to the dogs like, hey, come on, blah, blah, and then we all troop outside. And one night I was sitting and I was on my feet, never said a word to the dogs. I was on my feet and out the door because I knew they were here. So that's one kind of experience. It's just a knowing. There's no doubt. Yeah, no. Another type of experience I've had, and it's very hard to describe, but I've seen other people try and describe it. To me, it's almost like the world reality is on a rheostat, like a pot. Like when you turn down a volume knob, you can feel it change, and it can be a little, you're like, well, what? But it's not frightening, it's not scary. And it's just like the whole world goes away. It's like the whole world just like fades and the noises stop. And I'll give you an example. One time I was walking on a trail, and I expected to have some contact there because I had remote viewed it and I recognized the location. And but it was very busy, extremely busy on this trail. People constantly coming and going. I had given up. I figured, okay, I'm just going to go home. And I got a little ways back down the trail, and all of a sudden everything just got really quiet and really still. And I'd say unearthly, but that sounds scary, and it's not scary. So that's the other way. It's almost, and I've had that experience a couple times, and it's like, I don't know, time stops or slows. And what was really strange is the whole time I was there, nobody came through. There was no hikers and no walkers. And so I don't know if it was a time bubble or what that is. I don't know what it is, but the experience is actually very cool. How would I describe their presence? Well, that comes in a lot of different ways. That depends on if you're talking about an interdimensional or a physical being. And I think we're kind of focusing on physical beings today. My experience, wow, is it's a mixture of excitement and sort of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and awe, and it almost get like a little kid just kind of like frozen with indecision. What do I do? What do I say? And it's a little bit overwhelming. And it's funny because I look back on it, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm standing there frozen. Like I'm in, what is it when you're like really impressed by a celebrity? There's a word for that. You know what I'm trying to say? You just get all tongue tied and you can't speak, and you're just kind of, so anyway, so that's my experience of one of the two times I've been in the presence of a physical extraterrestrial, but we'll get to that later. And what I describe their presence as infiltration. I thought what I would do is read to you the definition of infiltration, which is to enter or become established gradually or unobtrusively, usually for subversive purposes. All right, let's talk about subversive for just a second. Subversive, here's the definition: a systemic attempt to overthrow or undermine a government or political system by persons working secretly within. No, I wouldn't describe this as infiltrative. And, there's a lot of words that could apply. It could be visitation. It could be experience. It could be education. It could be a whole bunch of things. But I think the last thing that I would call it is an infiltration. And I thought that was very loaded language and really terribly unfair to the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I can go next if you want. I'll just follow on from what Linda said, really. Yeah, infiltration. When I watched it, I thought, wow, what's really happening is, I think Linda said there, education. That's a good word because they've educated me. Communication, that is a good word. Obviously, here to assist humanity itself. Again, words that describe the positive side of the contact. We all have our own contact, and most of us are very extensive contact. So we're used to seeing them. We're used to interacting with them. They do use their technologies as well. But I still think the word of infiltration. I mean, Richard Dolan's very articulate anyway. He's a very good storyteller. But to use that particular word, it jumped out at me and slapped me across the face. I thought, that's not a good word to use. So I would say education, communication, using their technologies, using consciousness itself in educating us to their level of understanding consciousness, that we can communicate with them at their level without being frightened, without being fearful. So, yeah, that will be my take on the infiltration.
Great. Okay, Nancy, David, Cindy, Karin? Go ahead, Cindy.
Lindy kind of used the same words as I did. It's like a dream state, a knowing, telepathic, intuitive experience. When you're being called outside, you look to the skies, you're not searching, you look exactly right where it is. So for other people that haven't had experiences or contact, they have to actually search the skies. So that's what makes it different for us in having more than just one experience. I mean, I've had physical contact with them as well as the interdimensional type contact. For me, I experience their energy, their frequency. So that's something I'm comfortable with. I feel all the time. And so the infiltration part too, I found very offensive. But coming from Dolan, I'm not surprised. But no, it's not anywhere near that word. So I kept it brief.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, Nancy, Karin, David.
I agree with Linda quite a bit on these questions. I'll start with the first one. What abilities are they using to indicate their presence? Mostly telepathic for me. What feels like or seems like a dream state, but I knew I was awake. But it's definitely an altered state. And I don't know how to explain it other than you want to say dream, but it's not. It's not a dream. It's more like a memory, but not as clear and concise as maybe a true physical memory. It's very kind of confusing. The presence is, to me, more telepathic. I've seen craft. I've gone out, just like other people have said, and looked right where it's supposed to be. And there's a huge flash bulb often. A sphere, glowing ship I've seen. So it's both a knowing where you're like, that's real, but am I sure it's real? There's some element of an ontological shift that takes quite a while to wrap your head around, because it does not fit with the paradigm of your known reality. So you kind of do have to get to a knowing place, because there's not a lot of other experiences to help you define it. How would I describe their presence? I've seen a light being, which was humanoid. I knew I was awake, but still had a dreamlike quality. I definitely would not describe it as infiltration, but that, having said that, I'm coming at it from a psychologist counseling aspect, where I've been very fascinated with the abduction phenomenon in a negative context or positive, because if you are a researcher and you're talking to people who have had abduction experiences, I can see how infiltration might enter your world, whether if it's a negative experience, and you've studied many, many, many cases with similar variables, it might feel like infiltration. And if you're a researcher like Dolan, who is an amazing historical researcher, mostly nuts and bolts, is just starting to get into maybe the consciousness part of it, you're going to probably think infiltration. So a lot of it may have to do with your own personal experience. I personally think there's both good and bad, negative, positive beings, mostly positive, just like in our own world. Why would there not be? Why would there be all benevolent? We don't even have that on our earth. So if you extrapolate that out to the universe, if you even said 5% negative, that could be a lot. So I don't want to discount people who've had negative experiences not knowing the agenda or motivation of said beings, but my experiences of both. An experience that was negative, but I had somehow been helped and identified with a group that was positive, and they didn't let it happen. I don't know how, but that was an experience I had.
Nancy and David?
Shall I go? Okay.
Go ahead, David.
I haven't had so much of the physical encounters. I've had encounters in meditations or in group meditations, and what others have described just there about time standing still rings a bell for me also. I'd refer to them as waking dreams at one time. So I have had those sorts of encounters more than the physical ones. People have picked up on the word infiltration, and it's a pretty negatively charged word. And I think this brings us to one of the issues in communications between extraterrestrial beings and humanity, in that we tend to be very close to our fear centers. And so when we encounter something, our immediate reaction is, and it's difficult to get beyond that in constructing a purposeful or beneficial relationship of any kind. One of the other things that I'm picking up on is the are we being naive? And I don't find it so at all. I would always encourage people to be discerning over their experiences, but discerning doesn't necessarily translate as distrusting. Discerning, decide, are they manipulating? And I've had these experiences where I've been at a point where I've asked myself, am I being manipulated? And the answer is clearly no. No, I'm not being manipulated. If anything, I'm being respected, that I'm choosing my own way and I'm not just doing or saying whatever they would prefer me to say.
Thanks, David. Nancy.
All right. So infiltration. That was an interesting choice of word, but not unexpected for a whole bunch of reasons. But infiltration, I normally associate with either military infiltration of an enemy country, let's say, or of an intelligence infiltration to sort of try to get behind the scenes and collect information and data. So in that sense, yeah, I could sort of understand. It sort of says everything about what he's thinking. And particularly if you look at his two examples where he's talking, he quickly says, no, I haven't had any of these experiences. But he almost speaks about them as if they're his, in a sense, of these sort of blonde, blue-eyed, I suppose, Nordic types who are dressed in these amazing blue fabric outfits, and they're telepathically communicating with the people he's researched. Okay, is that infiltration? So then I think you have to look at the idea of infiltration suggests that you're entering, let's say, a foreign country and trying to mix in so that you are the same as them and to collect information that you might not otherwise have access to. That doesn't make any sense. All right. So do they they clearly didn't look like us, even in the description. Yeah, they're sort of humanoid, but they're so clearly not, according to Dolan. Then, is that infiltrating? Well, they're hanging around for sure. Are they collecting data? Well, the thing that I think that the little girl said, when she was describing the two in church, and she said, do you think that, and she's saying telepathically, she was hearing that, do you think they see us or do they notice us? And the other one says, yes, I think we're good, except for the little girl behind us who can hear us. And then they stop. So is that a kind of infiltration on a certain level? Maybe they're trying to come in completely discreet and unknown. Why? I don't know. I don't know what the purpose is on that. Infiltrate's an interesting word, but I think that it's a little bit premature to use that word because we simply don't know. And I don't think, none of my experiences are suggesting infiltration. It suggests either that they're here, they've been here, that they are just traveling around, or mixing in interdimensionally. They're doing a bunch of things. But I don't particularly, unless you go with sort of the nasty little grays doing experiments and building up a hybrid race to take over the human race. Yeah, that would be an infiltration. But Dolan's not talking about that.
Have you had an experience with an extraterrestrial that seemed to be a humanoid, similar to the two instances that Dolan provided for?
Yeah, I could answer that because my first example of that, I was 8 years old, and two beings materialized in the bathroom. I know them now. I've known them all my life. Their names are Orton D. They are Arcturians, and if I describe them, you will recognize the description because they were very attractive, male and female. They had deep blue eyes and were wearing a deep blue colours in their jumpsuit type garment and speaking telepathically. So those are all the things that Nolan talked about that the young girl saw. And I know of others that have seen them as well. I know a friend of mine, Rebecca Renfro, she's seen Orton D as well. And I know another, a medical person, I won't give any details, but let's say a medical practice, and two beings walked in to have a checkup, a health check, and very attractive, model in appearance, really attractive, standing out. They weren't regular patients. They went in, they got examined, and then they left. There was nothing wrong with them. Then a friend of mine went to the same practice. She's friends with the doctor, and the doctor told her about these two beings. She says, you describe them. I know who they are as a description of them in Kevin's book, because she was a friend of mine. So she went out to get the book, came back, and showed her the sketches at the back of the book. Yes, that's them, exactly the same. So they are showing themselves, and it turns out that this particular doctor is a friend of Ray Hernandez. I mean, these coincidences that keep coming round and round and round again. They are out there. They are showing themselves to different people. But the description of those particular two, because they're Arcturian, I know where they're from, I know a lot about them, and they're the ones that really educated me throughout my life. So it's not a infiltration. To me, they're my star family, my extended star family, and they're here to educate me, which they have done. So yes, going back to the infiltration again, it's not that. It's something much more than that. So.
We as we continue with this discussion, it becomes more and more obvious that we need a new language to talk about all of this, to replace abduction for those who didn't feel that, to talk about infiltration. We need new language. So anybody else have an experience with a particular humanoid? Go ahead, Cindy.
Well, besides the cloned little girls, the Nordics, the tall whites, the Virgin Mary, who appear to be humans, there was one incident that was actually a human that started to reveal themselves at a beach. Personally, I saw it, where her skin, she had a bikini on, and her skin along her back started changing into a reptilian pattern. And I had only, in all of my lifetime, 75 years, I've only seen that one time. My husband and I were at that beach in Puerto Vallarta, and we both saw it. And, you know, boyfriend or husband guy that was with her was trying to cover her with a towel, and they scooted off. And they were like, looking around to see if anybody noticed, but telepathically, I'm sure they were scooting off because they knew that we saw them. So in a humanoid fashion, that puts a different spin on it.
That's great. Nancy, David, Karin, Linda, humanoids. Go ahead, David, and then Linda. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make a point, really. I'll tell you a short story. On a couple of occasions, psychic friends of mine have referred to a being, a guide that's with me, that is a short man with bald head, and he refers to me as brother. That was fine. I wasn't particularly aware of him until one day I became aware of an Arcturian that was referring to me as brother. This indicates that some species, depending on their level of evolution, and don't forget when we talk about extraterrestrials, we're talking about all sorts of beings at all sorts of different levels of evolution. Some of them are able to project themselves into different forms. That goes into the mix when we're talking about humanoid people that we may encounter.
Oh, thanks, David. Linda, and then Nancy and Karin. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, actually, I've had two experiences that were oddly remarkably similar to the experiences that Richard mentioned. One of them was with one of those, what he called the lurch. And I actually described this person as in the same way when I shared the story once or twice. And then again, oddly enough, I had an experience where I identified a humanoid ET because I was attracted to the fabric that this lady was wearing. And it was just gorgeous fabric. Now, I'm not a real clothes person, but it definitely caught my eye. And so then that's what first caught my eye. And then as I watched and studied, I saw some other things and a couple other things. So I've seen two different types of non-human ETs.
Great. Nancy and Karin?
You all are talking about very physical, very visual experiences. Mine, I think, have come in a variety of different ways. And I'm being triggered now by Linda's talking about that same blue fabric. And I'm also being triggered by David, I think, talking about this kind of morphing. And also by Cindy's talking about the revealing of this sort of reptilian aspect or whatever, almost as this morphing shielding thing or whatever. But anyway, very long story short, when I went to Russia, I came back, although I went there perfectly healthy, I came back with a broken back and was broken. The bones were broken and the vertebrae was ruptured. And there was nerve issues and all kinds of stuff and dislocation. For no particular physical reason that I knew of. And I was in excruciating agony for 9 months and then had a lucid dream. And I've always been a lucid dreamer since I was a kid. In this lucid dream, a red helicopter lands on my front lawn. A guy gets out. And now I'm also being triggered by that lurch description, which I realized related to the thing that Dolan was describing about how the two were met by a guy in the forest who looked kind of like Lurch. This never occurred to me till this second. At any rate, in my dream, this very tall guy who in my mind reminded me, I couldn't describe him particularly well, but he was a tall guy. He was very rough, ordinary looking. I would have described him as the farmer guy from Men in Black, the Edgar, and the being puts on the Edgar suit. Mm-hmm. Isn't that peculiar? Because I never thought about that. But there's a relationship to sort of a Lurch type of a character At any rate, he rang my doorbell. I go to the front door. He hands me a package wrapped in brown paper and twine, and it's extremely heavy, and it's about 5 inches by about 3 inches. And he says, "Here, you're going to need this." And I said, "Well, why?" And when I asked him this, his entire body disappeared. It dematerialized in front of me, like twinkling, like a TV set that hasn't quite turned off yet. And what was left in its place in the air, roughly 4.5 feet up in the air, these globes of neon blue, extraordinary, with things hanging down, which I could only vaguely say sort of seaweed-ish, but what the heck? In other words, whatever he was, whatever this sort of lurch equivalent was, who then morphed, he then became something completely indescribable that was an absolutely fascinating shade of blue. The next morning, I woke up, went out to get my coffee, and my back was healed. So I believe that what was given to me, which I believe was a form of bismuth, that they healed me. Are they mean and nasty? In my world, no. Does that mean they couldn't be? No, I don't discount that either. And I'm certainly not naive.
Thanks, Nancy. Karin.
I don't have a lot of physical experiences with any presence that's humanoid, except in one instance, and I would describe it more as a light being in a humanoid form, which was a young girl, but her hair was dark and her eyes were very, very large and green. So a little bit different than what Dolan's describing, and not in a real physical sense. It was definitely more a dimensional aspect to it.
Thanks, Karin. Go ahead, Cindy.
I just want to let everybody know who's not familiar with my other stories in contact. So, because they're bringing up this blue color. I've had contact since I was 2 years old. And even as a mom, because it's generational for me with my kids, grandkids, there's always this neon cobalt blue color that emanates in the room under the door of when the ETs are in the room and visiting. So just so you know that this blue color is nothing to ignore. It's what I call a symbol of contact.
I think we could do a whole show on blue.